A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist. A link is given in the video description. Episode 22. Seeing that Jonathan was full of confidence, Lucian asked, "What is it? Stop keeping me in suspense." Jonathan broke into a casual smile. To further develop traditional medicine, our country provides the best environment to do so. I'm sure that was Dr. Jarvis' objective when she chose to return. It's just... Here, Jonathan threw Lucian a glance. There was no need for him to finish his sentence. Roxanne had come back to Chania so that she could expand the field of traditional medicine. Unfortunately, she didn't expect to run into the Farwell family and be forced to leave. Meeting Jonathan's gaze, the frustrated Lucian grimaced. "But if the proposition is attractive enough, I'm sure Dr. Jarvis will be willing to stay for the sake of traditional medicine research," Jonathan said. "I'm sure you have heard about the prestigious families who live in seclusion within Chania. Among them, the Damaris family used to cause waves within the field of ancient medicine. Unfortunately, they gradually faded out of the public eye. But they have recently prepared to come out of seclusion to provide medical consultation. I'm sure Dr. Jarvis will be interested in the matter." Even Lucian couldn't help but be shocked when he heard about the Damaris family. At present, the most prestigious family within the medical fraternity in Horrington was the Queen family. Even then, they paled in comparison to the Damaris family. For generations, the Damaris family had worked closely with traditional medicine practitioners. In fact, legend had it that their ancestor was once a royal doctor who not only possessed extraordinary medical skills but had kept a collection of books on ancient medicine from the palace. Subsequently, these books were handed down through the generations to this day. Whenever someone doubted the family's heritage, they would prove their skills and the authenticity of their medical books, humiliating their detractors in the process. At present, those ancient medicine books had naturally become priceless treasures. Having stayed away from the limelight for a long period of time, the Damaris family had been revealing themselves slowly again. Every few years, they would send someone out to provide medical consultation, although the time was never fixed. Whoever needed their services would have to rely on luck. Despite being one of the most prestigious families in Horrington's medical circle, the Queen family only got wind of the matter because of Alfred's relationship with the Damaris family. Since Roxanne specialized in traditional medicine, she would definitely have heard of the Damaris family. Therefore, if she were to learn about the Damaris family's medical consultation, it might be reason enough for her to stay back in Chania. When Jonathan saw the thoughtful expression on his friend's face, he dropped another bomb with a smile. On top of that, the Damaris family isn't just stopping at providing medical consultation this time. I heard that after the event, they plan to set up a research institute in Chania to further expand the influence of traditional medicine. They will be looking for other organizations to collaborate with. In my opinion, other than Dr. Jarvis Research Institute, no one else is worthy enough to do so. I'm sure Dr. Jarvis will take the initiative to work with them once she learns of this news." Putting aside the fact that he was trying to help out a friend, Jonathan meant what he said. After all, he had seen Roxanne's medical skills with his very own eyes. Throughout the years, none of the famous doctors from all over the world had been able to cure Alfred until Roxanne appeared. No one else in Chania was more skilled than Roxanne when it came to traditional medicine. Jonathan had planned to take advantage of the opportunity on behalf of Queen Group. After all, the Damaris family would probably work with them out of respect for Alfred. However, if Roxanne was to be his competitor, he was more than happy to step aside to give her the opportunity. After all, Queen Group was already working with Roxanne's research institute and would, by association, be collaborating with the Damaris family too. After Lucian heard Jonathan's explanation, his expression began to soften. He was well aware of Roxanne's personality. Traditional medicine was undoubtedly one of the most important things in Roxanne's life. If such an opportunity were to fall into her hands, Roxanne would most definitely choose to stay in Chania and fight for the chance to collaborate with the Damaris family. What do you think of my idea? Jonathan smiled proudly. A small smile appeared on Lucian's face. Not bad. If you can make her stay, I'll owe you a favor. Farwell Group did not venture deep into the medical industry and did not have many connections with the Damaris family. In other words, Lucian did not have much say in that matter. Even if he did manage to score Roxanne an opportunity with the Damaris family, Roxanne might still reject the offer if Lucian was the one telling her about it. It would be too huge of a loss if that were to happen. However, if Jonathan was the one who brought Roxanne the news, it would seem a lot more official. Jonathan arched an eyebrow slyly in response. You can repay me by giving me a monetary gift when you two get married. With that, Jonathan stood up and left before Lucian could say another word. After Jonathan exited Farwell Group, he did not go back to his company. Instead, he headed straight for the Queen residence. He had thought through the plan and decided that it would be far more convincing if Alfred were to tell Roxanne the news instead of himself. If Alfred personally informed Roxanne about the opportunity, chances were he would not think there was anything else to it. As Jonathan stepped foot into the house, Alfred was exercising with the help of a caregiver. Upon seeing Jonathan's sudden return, Alfred asked in confusion, "You're back already? Is there no more work back at the office?" Jonathan walked over to help support Alfred's other arm with a smile. "Actually, Grandpa, I'm here to discuss something with you." Alfred nodded slightly. "Go ahead." "It's about the medical consultation held by the Damaris family. Is it all right if I ask you to talk to the Damaris family about Dr. Jarvis so that she can join the consultation?" Jonathan asked. Alfred was acquainted with the Damaris family. He might have a say in the medical consultation. Immediately, Alfred nodded. "Of course. I have already intended to do so even if you didn't ask me to." The Queen family had been in the business of supplying herbs for ages. That being said, the family had impeccable respect for traditional medicine. In all his years in the industry, Alfred had never met anyone else as established in traditional medicine as Roxanne at such a young age, except for the Damaris family. Needless to say, Alfred would not miss such a golden opportunity. Moreover, Alfred could see Roxanne's passion for traditional medicine and knew how precious the opportunity would be to Roxanne. The moment Alfred found out that the Damaris family would be having a medical consultation, he had already planned to introduce Roxanne to the Damaris family. Seeing that Alfred shared the same train of thought, Jonathan breathed a soft sigh of relief. "So, regarding the partnership with the Damaris family at the Research Institute," he asked cautiously, testing the waters. Naturally, Alfred caught on to what Jonathan was implying. Instantly, he tossed a meaningful gaze at his grandson. "Do you have feelings for Dr. Jarvis?" Jonathan was rendered speechless. He had no other feelings for Roxanne except admiration. Furthermore, Roxanne was someone Lucian had his eye on. How could Jonathan betray his friendship with Lucian by catching feelings for Roxanne? To his dismay, everyone seemed to have a misunderstanding on that matter, and he was beyond exasperated. At the sight of Jonathan's expression, Alfred realized that he had been mistaken and flashed his grandson an understanding smile. That night, Roxanne went personally to the Queen residence to show her gratitude. During dinner time, Alfred conveniently brought up the news regarding the Damaris family. "Dr. Jarvis, the Damaris family is planning to have a medical consultation. Would you be interested in being a part of it? If you're interested, I can help introduce you to them." The shock was written all over Roxanne's face. Even though she had mostly been living overseas, the Damaris family was no stranger to her. In the world of traditional medicine, the Damaris family was nothing short of legendary. The younger ones in the industry would always hear about the legacy of the Damaris family, yet they rarely stood a chance to meet them in person. Because Roxanne had been overseas for so long, it was even harder for her to have any encounter with the Damaris family. Okay. Now, regarding the issue, the Damaris family are the ones looking for a partner. They will be the ones with the final say. I do not have much say in this matter. I'm just informing you beforehand. When it comes down to the Queen family and Dr. Jarvis, and the Damaris family chooses Dr. Jarvis Research Institute above us, please don't be disappointed." Alfred merely chuckled nonchalantly. Dr. Jarvis is a skilled competitor. Besides, if the Damaris family believes that she's a better fit, what is there for me to say? Don't worry. There will be no disappointments on my end. Seeing how open-minded Alfred was regarding the matter, Jonathan felt relieved. In that case, I will need your help to inform Dr. Jarvis about this opportunity. Alfred agreed without any hesitation. Even so, she had longed to meet and interact with them. After all, the Damaris family was extremely skilled in traditional medicine. The family also owned an array of books on traditional medicine that had been passed down from generation to generation. Everything regarding the Damaris family left Roxanne in awe. For her to achieve the medical skills she had as of then, a huge contributing factor was the few ancient books on traditional medicine that Harvey owned. The books owned by the Damaris family were far greater than the ones her professor owned. Every single book was so rare and precious that not even wealth can guarantee someone those books. To those who studied traditional medicine, those books were worth far more than gold or silver. If she got a chance to read those books or even just to have the guidance of the elders of the Damaris family, Roxanne had no doubt that her medical skills would improve greatly. Before she returned to Chania, Roxanne had planned to visit the Damaris family if given the chance. To her disappointment, when she returned to Chamara, she found out that the Damaris family had withdrawn themselves from society a couple of years ago. It seemed as though the family had stopped interacting with people that they did not know. It would be near impossible for someone like her, a newbie without any foundation, to even touch the doorknob of the Damaris residence. Adding the hindrance of Farwell Group into the picture, Roxanne had no choice but to give up on that plan of hers. When she heard the offer being presented by Alfred, Roxanne felt as though she was dreaming. "I'm extremely interested," but would it be too much trouble for you? I heard that the Damaris family had not had any contact with strangers these past few years. At the sight of Roxanne's surprised expression and knowing her undeniable love for traditional medicine, Alfred was delighted. I suppose you can say that I'm acquainted with the Damaris family. It shouldn't be too hard for me to score you a place in the medical consultation, Alfred reassured with a smile. But if I were to curry favor on your behalf, you must perform exceptionally. Don't embarrass me. Even after hearing Alfred's words, Roxanne was still a little hesitant. Old Mr. Queen, the Queen family has already blessed me greatly. You don't need to do this for me. Before she could even finish speaking, Alfred glared at her in disagreement. Roxanne quickly went silent. You saved my life. You deserve every bit of the things the Queen family has given you. Plus, I'm willing to introduce you to the Damaris family. It's a decision I have put a lot of thought into. As a prestigious family in the medical world, people like me are supposed to support bright, young people like you. There aren't a lot of young people specializing in traditional medicine in Chania anymore. You have a lot of potential in you. If you can get the chance to interact with the Damaris family, it can serve as an opportunity for you to hone and improve your medical skills. If you miss this opportunity, even I will feel sorry for you. At this moment, Jonathan chimed in, indeed. Dr. Jarvis, I have seen your medical skills with my own eyes. Not to mention that the Damaris family is planning to build a research institute in Chania after the medical consultation, they're looking for a partner. If you can get their attention from the medical consultation, your research institute might stand a chance to collaborate with them. Roxanne felt a tug in her chest when she heard the news. She instantly agreed, in that case, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Old Mr. Queen. Don't worry. I will not let you down. Alfred responded with a joyful grin. At the same time, Jonathan secretly sighed in relief and immediately texted Lucian about the news. When Roxanne returned home from the Queen residence, Archie and Benny were already waiting for her in the house. Uncharacteristically, the two boys did not welcome Roxanne at the door that night. Instead, they were seated on the couch and seemed to be in low spirits. No one knew what was going on inside their minds. Roxanne tossed Lissa a look of confusion. Lissa shrugged helplessly in response. They've been like this since I picked them up tonight. Archie and Benny had been playing happily with Estella. However, the three of them suddenly turned gloomy when they saw Lissa walking toward them. On their journey back home, it was evident that Archie and Benny were unhappy until then, their spirits had not been lifted. Roxanne was originally overjoyed and looking forward to the medical consultation by the Damaris family. However, when she saw the boys' dejected faces, the anticipation in her heart was quickly replaced by worry. What happened today? Did you guys have a fight with your friends? Roxanne probed gently as she took a seat next to Archie and Benny. Only when they heard the sound of her voice did the two boys look up at her. The disappointment was written all over their tiny faces. Roxanne's heart could not help but ache. What happened? Would you like to tell me? After a moment, Benny began to speak softly. Mommy, why didn't you come to pick us up tonight? Archie, on the other hand, merely looked at her with his lips pursed. Roxanne was dumbfounded. I had something to do tonight. Someone has helped to solve the problem with the research institute. I had to go visit and thank them. After that, she asked hesitantly, "Are you too unhappy because I didn't pick you guys up?" The two boys nodded in response. Roxanne seldom sent them to kindergarten. When she had done so that morning, the two boys thought that she would pick them up as well. Estella, too, had thought the same. Because of that, Estella had been extremely excited throughout the entire day. To their dismay, Roxanne was not the one to pick them up at night. When Estella saw Lisa, her eyes turned red in disappointment. Archie and Benny were upset at seeing the look on Estella's face. They knew that Estella liked Roxanne, and Roxanne had been avoiding Estella lately. Even though Estella would still play with Archie and Benny in kindergarten, they could clearly tell that she was unhappy. Estella was overjoyed when she finally got to see Roxanne that morning. Her unwillingness to part with Roxanne that morning did not get unnoticed by the two kids. Therefore, they were just as disappointed as Estella was when Roxana did not pick them up that night. Roxanne had no clue as to why Archie and Benny were upset. Lisa and Madeline had been sending them to kindergarten and picking them up previously because she had been busy. And the boys had never looked so disappointed before. "Mommy, now that the issue with the research institute is settled, does that mean we're leaving the country soon?" Benny asked carefully. He still remembered that Roxanne had told them that they would be leaving the country as soon as she finished her work in Chania. By then, they would not be able to see Estella anymore. Likewise, Estella would not be able to meet Roxanne anymore either. At that thought, the two boys lowered their heads miserably. Once Archie and Benny were comforted, Roxanne breathed out a sigh of relief. After they finished eating, Roxanne sent Archie and Benny into their room before she entered the study. According to Alfred, the medical consultation held by the Damaris family was in 2 days. She needed to understand more about the consultation in advance. Before that, she had only heard of the medical consultations by the Damaris family, but she had never really looked into it, and neither had she imagined herself to be lucky enough to have the chance to participate in it. Since the unexpected opportunity had landed in her hands, she was determined to perform well. Without many leads for her to find out more about the process of the medical consultation, Roxanne could only use the most unreliable method, searching online, and hope for the best. If she were lucky, she would be able to get a glimmer of information. Hearing the boys mention the matter of leaving the country, Roxanne began to understand where the boys were coming from. Patting their heads gently, she flashed them a comforting smile. "Not yet. We might not be leaving so soon." The boys' eyes lit up. "Really? Why?" Roxanne's smile widened. "There's still something I need to do, so we'll still be staying in Chania. You two will need to take good care of Essie in kindergarten." The two boys immediately bobbed their heads vigorously. The disappointment instantly vanished from their faces. As long as they were still in Chania, Estella would still have the chance to meet Roxanne. Unfortunately, the Damaris family was far too mysterious for the common men. Despite the fact that the Damaris family had held multiple medical consultations before, the information that could be obtained online was quite miserable. After a long while of searching but to no avail, Roxanne resorted to giving Harvey a call. Harvey answered the call in no time. Without beating around the bush, Roxanne asked, "Professor Lambert, Do you know anything about the Damaris family? Harvey was bewildered. The Damaris family withdrew themselves from society a few years ago. Why the sudden question? I heard that the Damaris family is having a medical consultation, so I was hoping to understand more about it. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of information regarding them online, which is why I'm asking you. I was hoping that you could provide some useful information, explained Roxanne succinctly. Upon hearing her explanation, Harvey responded with a hum before falling silent for a few seconds. After a while, he replied, I have been overseas all these years. Unfortunately, I do not know much about the Damaris family either. However, if you want to know more about the family, I can recommend an online forum. The contents of those forums usually revolve around prestigious families in the world of traditional medicine. Hope it helps. Thank you, Professor Lambert, Roxanne replied with a smile. Harvey smiled without giving it much thought before changing the subject. Didn't you say you'll be coming back soon? How are things going in Chania? Do you need my help? Harvey was in the loop about what had happened to Roxanne's research institute. However, he could not be of much assistance because of the great distance between them. Nevertheless, he had long prepared a project for Roxanne. As soon as she returned, she could immediately start working. With an apologetic tone, Roxanne answered, the issue with the research institute has been settled, but I think I'll be staying here for a while longer. I want to wait until the medical consultation with the Damaris family is over. If Roxanne could catch the attention of the Damaris family, her research institute would stand a chance to collaborate with them. Naturally, Roxanne would not let go of such an opportunity so easily. On the other end of the line, Harvey grunted with a smile. But I'm here waiting for you to be part of my main force. Another wave of guilt hit Roxanne. My apologies, Professor Lambert. Just as she was about to apologize, Harvey burst out laughing. All right, I'm just kidding. I allowed you to go back to Shania because I was hoping that you would hone your skills in traditional medicine when you were there. Since such a golden opportunity has befallen you, as your professor, of course I want to wish you the best. I hope you perform well during the consultation. Don't embarrass me. Roxanne's lips curled into an obedient smile. Don't worry. I'll do my absolute best. Don't worry about me here. Whenever you plan to come back, just give me a ring, said Harvey sincerely. Roxanne was touched. Thank you, Professor. After that, Harvey continued asking about Archie and Benny out of concern. Knowing that the boys were doing fine, Harvey finally hung up the phone in relief. Roxanne wasted no time at all in opening the forum that Harvey had recommended. At first glance, the forum looked a little old. However, a lot of the posts were posted only a few minutes ago. Most of them were discussing the medical consultation by the Damaris family. Roxanne opened the thread one by one and browsed through the contents. A lot of people on the forum had attached their resumes on the forum in hopes of standing a chance to participate in the medical consultation with the Damaris family. From the looks of it, everyone had an impressive background. The more she browsed, the more Roxanne felt the need to work hard and perform well. If not, she would be disappointing all those who tried but did not get the chance to participate in the consultation. Only when she had scrolled till the very end did she see some information regarding the previous medical consultation held by the Damaris family. It was revealed by an anonymous participant in the last medical consultation. Roxanne read the post word by word twice. By the time she finished reading, she could almost memorize the whole thing. According to the anonymous doctor, every time the Damaris family organized a medical consultation, they usually targeted congenital diseases. The venue of the consultation would be abandoned orphanages or children's homes. They would give free medical consultations to the children there, and the consultation would usually last 3 days. In every medical consultation held by the Damaris family, all the participants were highly achieved doctors of traditional medicine within the country. Not only so, but the Damaris family themselves would send their younger family members to take part in the consultation. Even though they were the juniors of the Damaris family, their medical skills were enough to make others gasp in awe. Their skills were definitely worthy of respect. Of all the years of medical consultation, many children who had been abandoned because of their congenital diseases had finally gotten their treatment. Some of them had even made it to the front covers of newspapers. However, the Damaris family was not mentioned in the papers. That proved how low-key the Damaris family was despite their astonishing achievements. Not only was Roxanne a mother herself, but she also had a child who had passed away too early. Perhaps that was the reason why Roxanne had always had a soft spot for children. After Roxanne learned about the target groups for the medical consultation, her admiration for the Damaris family increased. To add to their admirable traits, the Damaris family had managed to investigate and come up with treatment plans for certain congenital diseases from those medical consultations. Their treatment plans had received so many positive results that they served as the gold standard in the traditional medical industry. In the past few years, tens of thousands of children with congenital diseases had been treated every year because of the methods devised by the Damaris family, especially those complicated congenital diseases that put all famous doctors from all over the world at a loss. As of then, tens of thousands of children getting treated every year sounded like a fantasy. As Roxanne continued to research, the excitement in her heart to meet the Damaris family grew. Among the list of diseases that the Damaris family had found the treatment for, Roxanne had researched some of them herself. However, just as her research was about to yield results, the treatment for those diseases appeared out of nowhere. Roxanne had carefully investigated the reliability and facts of the treatment. Upon finding out that it was reliable, she gave up on her own research. At the same time, she respected the party who had come up with the treatment. However, never did she imagine it to be the Damaris family. It was no wonder that the Damaris family managed to keep their legacy for generations upon generations. Purely because the Damaris family had contributed so much to children, Roxanne yearned to have a good relationship with the Damaris family. After all, she was someone who had lost a child. There was no one else who valued those precious little lives more than Roxanne. For a moment, Roxanne sat in silence, wallowing in her emotions. A few minutes later, she recollected herself and clicked on other posts. After browsing through most of the posts, Roxanne learned the basic flow of the medical consultation, which served as preparation for the consultation in a few days' time. Roxanne was so immersed in reading about the Damaris family that she did not notice that it was past midnight. When she finished reading about the Damaris family, it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. At the thought of work tomorrow, Roxanne reluctantly switched off her laptop and left the study. After a quick wash-up, Roxanne lay in bed with her mind still buzzing about the medical consultation. The next morning, Roxanne was still fast asleep when a knock sounded on her door. "Mommy!" Benny's childish voice called out from outside her bedroom. "Mommy, wake up!" The noise jolted Roxanne awake, and she quickly sat up. Thinking that the children were calling her because something had happened, she hurried over to open the door without even brushing up. When she opened the door, Archie and Benny greeted her with an innocent look. Looking up at Roxanne with puppy eyes, they whined, "Mommy, will you send us to the kindergarten today?" Their eyes were filled with anticipation. By then, Roxanne was fully awake. Upon hearing the boys' question, Roxanne was reminded of the disappointed looks on their faces the night before. After a few seconds of hesitation, Roxanne finally agreed, "You boys go ahead and have breakfast first. I'll be down in a few. After breakfast, I'll send you two to the kindergarten." Archie's and Benny's eyes lit up. Nodding obediently, they immediately trotted downstairs. After freshening up, Roxanne changed out of her pajamas. By the time she headed downstairs, the two boys were already waiting for her patiently at the table. During breakfast, the two boys were warmer than usual. They kept putting food onto Roxanne's plate. Knowing the reason behind Archie's and Benny's joy, Roxanne felt a mild exasperation in her heart, but there was nothing she could do about them. Remembering what Lucian had said to her the previous day, Roxanne could not help but agree with him. Archie and Benny were perfectly normal kids, but as soon as they started whining, Roxanne found herself fulfilling every request they had, and even more so toward someone emotionally unstable like Estella. Even though that was what she had told Lucian, it might not be effective. She had finally settled the problem with the research institute. Moreover, she managed to get such an amazing opportunity. She really did not want Sanvito get in her way again. Roxanne's gaze softened as she looked at the two boys beside her. In a nonchalant tone, she informed them, "I'll send you guys to the kindergarten today, but I'm going to be busy again soon. You will have to let Ms. Lane or Aunt Madeline fetch you, okay?" Archie and Benny looked at her suspiciously. "Isn't everything all right with the research institute now? What else are you busy with, Mommy?" Roxanne took a deep breath before explaining patiently. "There's this really awesome family of doctors who will be organizing a medical consultation in a few days. I will be joining the consultation, so I need to prepare. This opportunity means a lot to me. You two have to be good, okay?" Upon hearing Roxanne's explanation, Archie and Benny nodded reluctantly. Even though they felt sorry for Estella, they would ultimately still prioritize Roxanne's work. Seeing that her children were so thoughtful, Roxanne secretly sighed with relief. After breakfast, Roxanne brought the kids to the kindergarten. It was so early that there were not a lot of people at the kindergarten gate. Roxanne scanned her surroundings. When she did not see even a glimpse of Lucian or Estella, she felt the tension on her shoulders relax. After bringing Archie and Benny to Pippa, Roxanne turned to leave, hoping to get away before the two arrived. Archie and Benny, however, tried to get Roxanne to stay a little longer because Estella had not yet arrived. They knew that Roxanne would be busy again soon, and it would be harder for Estella to meet Roxanne. Archie and Benny did not want Estella to be upset. Needless to say, Roxanne was well aware of the boys' plan. After Roxanne left, Archie and Benny adamantly refused to enter the kindergarten. A headache assailed Pippa as she looked at them. Well, this is the first time they're being so stubborn. Archie, Benny, why don't you both go in first? She bent down and tried to persuade them. Archie merely pursed his lips without saying a word. Beside him, Benny blinked his eyes and gazed at Pippa pitifully. We're waiting for Essie, Ms. Ward. Upon hearing that, Pippa recalled their relationship with Estella. She patted them on the head, tacitly acquiescing to their request. Shortly after, Lucian's car slowly came to a stop at the kindergarten gates. Then, Estella was carried out of the car by Lucian. No sooner had she gotten out of the car than she lifted her head and darted her eyes around. The instant she caught sight of Archie and Benny, she instinctively searched for signs of Roxanne nearby, but to no avail. At that, she hung her head in disappointment. Lucian inexorably frowned when he noticed that only Archie and Benny were standing beside Pippa. Mr. Farwell. Pippa greeted respectfully as she took Estella from him. However, Lucian didn't leave immediately but lowered his head to gaze at the three children. Since last night, Essie has been in low spirits, probably because she didn't get to see Roxanne. This morning, she also clamored to come earlier, hoping to wait for her at the kindergarten. Unexpectedly, the woman took off again. After some words of comfort and encouragement, she quickly handed them over to Pippa and turned to leave without hesitation. With their gazes on Roxanne's diminishing silhouette, Archie and Benny lowered their heads dejectedly, not knowing how to face a disappointed Estella. She must be utterly disappointed. Likewise, chagrin swamped him. At the sight of Estella's disappointment, Archie and Benny went over to her in distress. They took her hands, one on either side. Mommy is very busy with work. She said there's an exceedingly important opportunity, for which she has to make preparations. That's why she left so early. All Estella heard was that Roxanne was busy with work. The disappointment on her face intensified. Then, is Ms. Jarvis not coming anymore? Previously, Ms. Jarvis always had no time to pick them up when she was busy with work. At times, she even uses work as an excuse to avoid me. Despite her tender age, she had always been very sensitive in that matter. Hearing that, Archie and Benny exchanged a glance, both feeling a tad guilty. Mommy did say that this morning, but how are we supposed to admit it when Essie is crestfallen now? They hesitated for a while before changing the subject nonchalantly. Beaming, they declared, although Mommy isn't coming these few days, she said we'd still be staying in Chania for some time. Estella's eyes lit up. Nonetheless, she eyed them in mild disbelief. Seeing that, Benny patted his chest confidently. It's true. Mommy's work this time has to be done in Chania. But we're not sure how long we'll be staying. Following that, Estella turned to Archie. Archie nodded solemnly, confirming his brother's words. Only when he had indicated as much that a smile bloomed on Estella's face. I thought Ms. Jarvis was going to go abroad soon, and I wouldn't be able to see her again. That was the reason for my sheer disappointment. But if they're telling me the truth, I'll still have an opportunity to see her as long as she's in the country. At that thought, she was ecstatic, grinning so widely that her eyes became mere slits. At the side, Lucian overheard the entirety of the three children's conversation. Over the next few days, Roxanne bustled around in preparation for the medical consultation. Her understanding of the Damaris family was limited to mere rumors in the forum forwarded by Harvey. However, all that wasn't quite enough for her. The opportunity this time was truly too rare for her. If she wanted to take advantage of it, she needed to make preparations as much as possible. Consequently, she had become a regular visitor to the Queen residence in the past few days. Alfred admired her greatly, so he answered every question she asked about the Damaris family. After they finished chatting about the Damaris family, Alfred had Roxanne help him to his seat. Then, he ventured solemnly. "Previously, I tried to feel you and Jonathan out, but neither of you has feelings for the other. I know that. But it's still not done for you to raise two children by yourself. Is there someone you like? Tell me, and I might be able to give you some suggestions." Roxanne was inevitably stunned when the subject went from the Damaris family to her without warning. Subsequently, she shook her head in slight embarrassment. "Archie and Benny are both sensible children, so I don't need to worry much about them. Besides, taking care of them is no trouble at all. I'd like to expand my career first before considering any romantic entanglements." When he heard Benny saying that Roxanne would be busy with work, he quirked an eyebrow thoughtfully. Sure enough, Jonathan's strategy has borne some fruit. Upon hearing that, Alfred cast her a disapproving look. "It might not matter to you, but the two children should have a father. Ultimately, all children yearn for a whole family." At the mention of Archie and Benny, Roxanne felt apologetic for a moment. She went silent and said nothing further. Retracting his gaze, Alfred suggested languidly. "The representative of the Damaris family this time is a young man who's outstanding in all aspects. I think you can consider him." No sooner had his words fallen than Jonathan's voice rang out at the mansion entrance. "Grandpa, what are you saying to Dr. Jarvis? How could there be a lack of suitors pursuing her when she's so outstanding? She naturally has her own plans that she's not considering them." He had nothing much to do at the office, so he came home early that day. After learning from the help that Roxanne was visiting, he decided to come over to greet her. Unexpectedly, he heard his grandfather playing matchmaker right as he stepped into the back garden. Hence, he hurried over to interrupt the man. Alfred might be in the dark about things, but he knew the truth all too well. Lucian has designs on Roxanne, so how am I to explain things to him if Grandpa really matches her up successfully with a stroke of luck? At his voice, both Alfred and Roxanne swung their gazes over in concert. Roxanne didn't want to speak of that topic in the first place, so she breathed a sigh of relief when Jonathan helped to diffuse the situation. Smiling, she greeted the man. Contrarily, Alfred shot a disgruntled glare at his grandson and chastised. "Brat, you don't even have a girlfriend, but you're poking your nose into Dr. Jarvis matters." Jonathan touched his nose sheepishly as he stood beside the two of them. "How's your preparation for the medical consultation since you've been working so diligently these few days, Dr. Jarvis?" Unaware of Jonathan's intentions, Roxanne merely regarded it as a joke. She calmly countered, "Don't make such a joke, Mr. Queen. Mr. Farwell already has a fiancé. Besides, I don't have any plans for a romantic relationship. Then, will you consider him if he doesn't have a fiancé? Jonathan pressed. Roxanne was startled for a moment. The smile on her face gradually faded, and she ended the subject coldly. It's late. I've got to hurry home. You should also go back in quickly, Mr. Queen. After saying that, she climbed into her car straight away. Before Jonathan could gather his wits about him, the car in front of him had already sped away. It wasn't until after Roxanne's car had disappeared from sight that he snapped back to his senses. Recalling her reaction earlier, he couldn't shake off the strangeness of it. I asked whether she'd consider Lucian, but her first reaction was that he had a fiancé. Smiling, Roxanne replied, "Thanks to old Mr. Queen recommending me to the Damaris family and patiently answering my questions about the Damaris family these few days, my confidence has skyrocketed." When Jonathan heard that, he casually arched an eyebrow. "Your medical skills are superb. You'll perform well even without all this. There's no need to be so nervous." Roxanne nodded smilingly. "Hopefully, that's the case, Mr. Queen." It was late then, so Roxanne took her leave. Jonathan saw her out. Before bidding her farewell, he suddenly remarked, "Don't listen to my grandfather. If you really plan to find the children a father, I think Lucian is a pretty good candidate." After she left the Queen residence, a mix of emotions brewed within Roxanne on a rare occasion. She had been busy with matters pertaining to the Damaris family recently, so she had tossed everything about the Farwell family into the back of her mind. Only occasionally did she hear Archie and Benny speaking about Estella when she went home. Lucian, on the other hand, seemed to have vanished from her world. Earlier, Jonathan had mentioned the man before her out of the blue and even proposed a question she had never once considered. If he doesn't have a fiancé? Roxanne wavered for a while before she gave a self-deprecating chuckle. How would he possibly allow such a possibility when he had been obsessed over Aubrey for so many years? On top of that, the lesson I learned 6 years ago was sufficient to have me give up on him. I don't want to repeat the same mistakes again. By the time she arrived home, Archie and Benny were already home. When they saw her stepping into the house, they docilely trotted over. But then, they weren't as enthusiastic as they were in the past. Ever since she started avoiding Estella, they appeared despondent every time she came home. At the sight of them, Roxanne was inexorably reminded of Estella. "When will you be finished with work, Mommy?" Benny queried in curiosity. Roxanne patted them on the head in consolation. "I'm not sure either, but this matter is really important to me, so the two of you have got to behave. When I'm done with work, I'll bring you out to have fun, okay?" The Damaris family would be choosing a collaboration partner after the medical consultation concluded. She didn't want any mistakes at any point in the process. Archie and Benny were clearly not quite eager to go out and have fun, for they merely nodded woodenly upon hearing that. Heckling in exasperation, Roxanne led them both to the dining table. After dinner, Archie and Benny weren't in the mood to play either. They retired to their room early. Roxanne dithered for some time before she followed them into their room. When Archie and Benny saw her coming in, they obediently sat on the edge of the bed side by side. With a smile on her face, Roxanne sat down beside them. Are you both unhappy because Essie isn't happy? Archie and Benny kept their lips pressed into a thin line in silent admission. Seeing that, Roxanne lifted her hand and stroked them on the head. The two of you have always been very smart. But why are you so silly this time? Archie and Benny tilted their heads in puzzlement. I like Essie a lot, too. But because of some reasons, I can't have too much contact with her. You should be understanding. If she's unhappy at the kindergarten, you've got to take good care of her on my behalf and make her happy. Roxanne then continued explaining patiently, she doesn't just like me. She also likes the two of you very much. As long as you treat her better, she'll definitely cheer up. Speaking of Estella, Roxanne couldn't help feeling somewhat distressed. The smile on her face turned a touch forced. Estella was unhappy because of her, yet she could only have Archie and Benny mollify the girl on her behalf. As Archie and Benny clocked her expression, their eyes dimmed. Self-reproach was written all over their faces. We're sorry, Mommy. Roxanne's brows furrowed in bafflement when they apologized all of a sudden. Benny muttered weakly, we shouldn't have thrown a tantrum with you because of Essie. You must also be very tired every day, Mommy. Don't worry. We'll do our best to make her happy henceforth. Just focus on your work, Mommy. We'll take good care of Essie. Archie echoed. Roxanne beamed in gratification. Thank you, darlings. But it'll be far better if you can go and visit Essie, Mommy, Benny added in a whisper. After saying that, he was afraid that Roxanne heard him, so he smilingly announced, it's okay even if you can't visit her. We'll help take good care of Essie on your behalf, Mommy. Roxanne smilingly patted him on the head. She watched as the two children went to bed before she stood up and returned to her room. Meanwhile, at the Farwell residence, Estella had been down in the dumps ever since she came home from kindergarten. Lucian's brows knitted together. Her mood has improved significantly after learning that Roxanne isn't going abroad so soon, but she's abruptly depressed again today for some inexplicable reason. What's wrong? He regarded her in bewilderment. Ms. Jarvis, Estella admitted sullenly. Sure enough, Roxanne is the only person who can cause her such emotional turmoil. Lucian's gaze darkened a shade. Isn't she no longer going abroad? Why are you still sad? Pouting, Estella glowered at him in displeasure. I haven't got to see her. She had thought she would have the opportunity to see Roxanne when the latter wasn't going abroad, but Roxanne had never once appeared in the past few days. Every day she went to kindergarten and back, she was hopeful beyond words. Alas, she ended up disappointed each day. After a few days, she couldn't help feeling dejected to the point that she was irate about seeing Lucian. It's because of Daddy that Ms. Jarvis is avoiding me. Lucian had no idea about her thoughts. It merely occurred to him out of the blue that the look in her eyes as she gazed at him was somewhat similar to Archie's and Benny's. Ever since Roxanne's showed up, all three kids seem to detest me. At that realization, he felt a headache building. Nonetheless, he patiently mollified her, saying, You'll get to see her eventually since she isn't going abroad. Conversely, Estella shot daggers at him, making it evident that she didn't believe him. Lucian massaged his temples. I'll figure out something for you. Now, go and sleep, okay? Estella eyed him skeptically for a long time. Then, she slowly extended her little finger at him and urged in a sweet voice, "Pinky promise." Lucian stretched out his hand and hooked pinkies with her before she relented. He sent her back to her room, but recalling her relentless wails when she had a nightmare back then, he didn't dare leave immediately. Instead, he waited until she was deep in slumber before getting to his feet and leaving. As he stood at the door, his expression was frightfully grim. She's so dependent on Roxanne, yet that woman is so cruel to her that she's unwilling to visit her even once. If she were to know what Roxanne told me that morning, she'd probably cry buckets. Early the following morning, Roxanne saw the message Larry had sent last night as soon as she awakened. It read, "Are you free tomorrow? How about a meal together?" She mulled over her work that day before texting back, "At noon, then. We'll have lunch near the research institute." On the other end of the phone, Larry promptly agreed. As soon as it was noon, Roxanne received a call from Larry. "Have you finished your work? I'm waiting for you at the research institute gates." Larry's voice rang out the instant she answered the call. Roxanne happened to be discussing a recent project with Colby. When Colby saw her taking the call, he timely halted the conversation and waited at the side. Hearing that Larry had already arrived, Roxanne reflexively glanced at Colby, who was standing across from her. Then, she murmured apologetically, "Please wait for a while, Larry. I've got something to wrap up on my end. You can come in and wait." Larry declined with a chuckle. "It's okay. I'll just wait for you at the gates." "Take your time," Roxanne murmured in acknowledgement. Subsequently, she hung up the phone and continued speaking to Colby about the project. In the few days to come, she wanted to concentrate on preparing for the Damaris family's medical consultation. Furthermore, the work at the research institute had long since stabilized, and the issue with the medical herb suppliers had been resolved. Therefore, she planned to entrust the matters at the research institute to Colby. After they talked for quite a bit, the handover of the work at the research institute finally came to an end. Roxanne still wanted to remind Colby of a few other things, but the man commented with a chuckle. "I've been with the research institute for a long time, and I've also been handling things with you all this while. You don't have to worry. Just leave everything here to me. Someone is waiting for you, no? Hurry up and go." Upon hearing that, Roxanne hesitated for a second before she nodded smilingly. "Speaking of that, he has been working at the research institute even longer than I have. And ever since I came over, we've been handling things together. Indeed, I don't have to worry. In that case, I'll stop rambling. You should be going to lunch as well. Let's go out together." She snagged her handbag and waited for Colby. While there was a cafeteria in the research institute, few ate in the cafeteria. Instead, they mostly patronized restaurants outside. Colby was no exception. Colby dithered for several seconds, knowing that he would inevitably see Larry if he went out with her. Since Roxanne was waiting for him, he ultimately fell into step with her after a brief hesitation. The two of them exited the research institute together. As Larry said, Roxanne caught sight of him waiting at the gates when she arrived at the entrance of the research institute. It was as though he was afraid that she couldn't see him, for he deliberately waited outside the car. The moment he spotted her coming out, he waved at her, signaling her over to him. Roxanne took her leave from Colby and strode over. As Colby gazed at her retreating back, his eyes dimmed, but they reverted to their usual calmness in the next heartbeat, and he inclined his head at Larry courteously. In turn, Larry flashed him a warm smile. That was the two of them greeting each other. When Roxanne reached him, Larry lifted his eyes and stared at Colby, who had turned around and gone a distance away. "Who's that?" he inquired. Curious. Smiling, Roxanne explained, "That's Colby Galloway. He's a colleague of mine at the Research Institute, and he's also an outstanding doctor. I've collaborated with him abroad, but I don't know whether the two of you have ever met." Larry nodded in acknowledgement. "Get in the car." I'm not sure whether I'm imagining things, but the look in his eyes when he regarded her earlier was seemingly strange. But then, I can't pinpoint what exactly bothered me. Early the following morning, Roxanne saw the message Larry had sent last night as soon as she awakened. It read, "Are you free tomorrow? How about a meal together?" She mulled over her work that day before texting back, "At noon, then. We'll have lunch near the Research Institute." On the other end of the phone, Larry promptly agreed. As soon as it was noon, Roxanne received a call from Larry. "Have you finished your work? I'm waiting for you at the Research Institute gates." Larry's voice rang out the instant she answered the call. Roxanne happened to be discussing a recent project with Colby. When Colby saw her taking the call, he timely halted the conversation and waited at the side. Hearing that Larry had already arrived, Roxanne reflexively glanced at Colby, who was standing across from her. Then, she murmured apologetically, "Please wait for a while, Larry. I've got something to wrap up on my end. You can come in and wait." Larry declined with a chuckle. "It's okay. I'll just wait for you at the gates." "Take your time," Roxanne murmured in acknowledgement. Subsequently, she hung up the phone and continued speaking to Colby about the project. In the few days to come, she wanted to concentrate on preparing for the Damaris family's medical consultation. Furthermore, the work at the Research Institute had long since stabilized, and the issue with the medical herb suppliers had been resolved. Therefore, she planned to entrust the matters at the Research Institute to Colby. After they talked for quite a bit, the handover of the work at the Research Institute finally came to an end. Roxanne still wanted to remind Colby of a few other things, but the man commented with a chuckle. "I've been with the Research Institute for a long time, and I've also been handling things with you all this while. You don't have to worry. Just leave everything here to me. Someone is waiting for you, no? Hurry up and go." Upon hearing that, Roxanne hesitated for a second before she nodded smilingly. "Speaking of that, he has been working at the Research Institute even longer than I have. And ever since I came over, we've been handling things together. Indeed, I don't have to worry." "In that case, I'll stop rambling. You should be going to lunch as well. Let's go out together." She snagged her handbag and waited for Colby. While there was a cafeteria in the Research Institute, few ate in the cafeteria. Instead, they mostly patronized restaurants outside. Colby was no exception. Colby dithered for several seconds, knowing that he would inevitably see Larry if he went out with her. Since Roxanne was waiting for him, he ultimately fell into step with her after a brief hesitation. The two of them exited the research institute together. As Larry said, Roxanne caught sight of him waiting at the gates when she arrived at the entrance of the research institute. It was as though he was afraid that she couldn't see him, for he deliberately waited outside the car. The moment he spotted her coming out, he waved at her, signaling her over to him. Roxanne took her leave from Colby and strode over. As Colby gazed at her retreating back, his eyes dimmed, but they reverted to their usual calmness in the next heartbeat, and he inclined his head at Larry courteously. In turn, Larry flashed him a warm smile. That was the two of them greeting each other. When Roxanne reached him, Larry lifted his eyes and stared at Colby, who had turned around and gone a distance away. "Who's that?" he inquired. "Curious?" Smiling, Roxanne explained, "That's Colby Galloway. He's a colleague of mine at the Research Institute, and he's also an outstanding doctor. I've collaborated with him abroad, but I don't know whether the two of you have ever met." Larry nodded in acknowledgement. "Get in the car." "I'm not sure whether I'm imagining things, but the look in his eyes when he regarded her earlier was seemingly strange. But then, I can't pinpoint what exactly bothered me." Roxanne knew absolutely nothing about the two men's thoughts. During the drive to the restaurant, she smilingly asked Larry, "Why did you suddenly decide to ask me out for lunch today? And did you just return from summer bank?" Larry nodded nonchalantly. "I just returned last night. I only boarded the flight after seeing Mr. Lynch off. It was already midnight by the time I landed." Recalling the time he sent her the message, Roxanne surmised that he had texted her mere moments after disembarking the plane. "Wonder what important matter he has to tell me. Mr. Lynch told me to convey his regards to you and asked whether the issue at the Research Institute has been resolved," Larry stated. The smile on Roxanne's face widened when she heard that Gerald remembered her. "It's all thanks to you and Mr. Lynch that night." Those medicinal herb suppliers were initially hesitant, but they respected Mr. Lynch, so they readily agreed after he said a few words. Larry inclined his head a fraction. "I'm glad to hear that the matter has been resolved. I'm just worried that Mrs. Farwell will make things difficult for you again in the future." Throughout it all, he had found things very much unfair on her behalf. He could somewhat guess the reason Sonia was targeting Roxanne. Reckoning that she resented the latter for leaving without a word back then and getting so familiar with Lucian at present. In his opinion, however, Roxanne was the victim. Furthermore, she wasn't the one who wanted to have so much contact with the man right then. Rather than wasting her time on Roxanne, he felt that Sonia would be better served to keep a closer eye on Lucian. He really wanted to help Roxanne, but he wasn't the head of the Morrison family. Besides, the Morrison family was no match for the Farwell family, so his hands were tied even if he wanted to help. Fortunately, the matter had been resolved. At the mention of Sonia, Roxanne's heart felt heavy. "I don't know either, but I've already done my utmost best to keep myself out of her line of sight. Hopefully, she'll forget all about me. It's particularly true at present when I've got a rare chance to attend a medical consultation with the Damaris family. Later, I still want to compete for the opportunity to collaborate with them." If I were to lose the chance because of her interference, I really wouldn't know what I'd do in retaliation. When Larry glimpsed the worry on her face, a flash of regret flitted across his eyes. He felt remorseful for bringing up such a sore point. The car plunged into a brief silence. A while later, Roxanne composed herself and changed the subject nonchalantly. "Oh yes, Larry, is something the matter that you asked me out for lunch all of a sudden today? After all, the last time we dined together was when he invited me to Bellbridge to attend the medical conference together back then. I wonder what it is this time." Hearing that, Larry put away his wandering thoughts and went straight to business. "You've been staying abroad all these years, so I don't know whether you've heard of the Damaris family. It's considered the leading prestigious family in traditional medicine, but it has recently retreated behind the scenes and rarely made any appearances. On the whole, it's a very mysterious family." It's the Damaris family again. This is the second time I've heard someone speaking of it Damaris family lately. Roxanne was a touch puzzled. "I've heard of it previously, and I've always had much interest in the Damaris family's ancient medicine books." As Larry and Roxanne conversed, the car arrived at the entrance of the restaurant. After Larry parked the car, the two of them entered the restaurant and sat down by the window. Larry had made a reservation long ago, so the food was served no sooner had they taken their seats. While eating, they talked about the Damaris family's medical consultation. News of the Damaris family's medical consultation is usually circulated within closed circles. "How did you learn about it?" Larry couldn't resist querying. Roxanne had nothing to hide, so she admitted, "I initially had no idea about it and was already planning to go abroad. But when I went to the Queen residence to thank them 2 days ago, old Mr. Queen suddenly brought it up to me. That's why I decided to stay a bit longer in Chania." When Larry heard that, he frowned. "Go abroad?" In response, Roxanne chortled airily. "As you can see, the research institute is targeted by Farwell Group with me here. Rather than staying in Chania and dragging the research institute down with me, it's better that I go abroad. I can't afford to offend Farwell Group, but I can at least stay away." Larry sighed soundlessly, finding it all truly unfair for Roxanne. "When I was abroad, I had hoped that I'd be so fortunate to have the opportunity to visit them, but I never had that opportunity. But I heard that they'll be having a medical consultation soon." The instant her words rang out, Larry arched an eyebrow and glanced at her in surprise. "I wonder where she got that news. This is precisely what I want to speak to you about today. But now that I know about the Damaris family's medical consultation, I'm not going to leave even if Mrs. Farwell wants to give me the boot." Roxanne flashed him a casual smile. Larry regarded her in exasperation, but all he saw on her face was anticipation for the medical consultation. Thus, he didn't mention Sonia again, lest he wreck her good mood. Instead, he uttered gently, "That's also why I asked you out today. The Damaris family's medical consultations have always been done in collaboration with doctors in the field. Are you interested?" If you are, we can contact Mr. Lynch right now. If he recommends you to the Damaris family, you'll be able to participate for sure. I've got a spot for a member of the Morrison family, so we can attend together at that time." Roxanne's eyes lit up. "You're also going to attend, Larry?" She had been worried that she would feel awkward then, but that wouldn't be an issue if Larry would also be there. At that, Larry quirked an eyebrow. Also? Your attendance has already been confirmed. Roxanne nodded with a grin. After old Mr. Queen told me about the Damaris family's medical consultation, he said he'd recommend me to the Damaris family. I've been making preparations for the medical consultation these few days, afraid that I'd make some blunder then and embarrass him and my mentor. With your medical skills, you definitely won't embarrass anyone as long as you perform as usual, Larry asserted. Hearing that, Roxanne smiled modestly. Larry then continued, that's also a good thing. With old Mr. Queen recommending you, we don't need to trouble Mr. Lynch, though the spot on his end was also prepared for you. At his remark, a hint of mystification flashed across Roxanne's eyes. Mr. Lynch hasn't accepted ments for many years. He admires you greatly since he met you back then. When he learned about the Damaris family's medical consultation this time, he thought of you right away. Hence, he had me return to ask you about your plans. If you'd like to attend, he'd recommend you to the Damaris family personally. Just when Roxanne walked over to the entrance of the research institute, she spotted Colby standing by the gates. The man was deep in thought, for he didn't even see her coming in. He was leaning against the wall in a trance with his face devoid of expression. Curious, Roxanne called out to him, "What are you thinking about, Dr. Galloway?" When her words rang out, Colby was evidently shocked. His brows furrowed, and he snapped back to his senses. Straightening, he swung his gaze at her. The two of you have finished talking so soon. Roxanne nodded with a smile. Larry is also planning to attend the Damaris family's medical consultation. We merely chatted briefly and agreed to go together. At that, a flash of desolation flitted across Colby's eyes. When he saw Roxanne with Larry at noon, he had no appetite during lunch. He merely took a few bites before driving back and waiting for Roxanne at the gates. As he was waiting, he subconsciously thought of the gap between them. Further hearing that Roxanne would be attending the medical consultation with Larry, he found the distance between them increasingly vast. Larry explained with a smile. Following his words, Roxanne felt very much flattered. She hastily replied, "I really appreciate the sentiment. I'll thank him profusely if I have the opportunity to meet him again next time. Please tell him that I'll do my best during the medical consultation this time without disappointing him." Larry agreed smilingly. After lunch, Larry drove Roxanne back to the research institute. "I'll pick you up after the location of the medical consultation has been decided in the next few days, and we'll go together," he suggested when Roxanne was getting out of the car. Roxanne assented with a smile. Colby suppressed the misery within him and nonchalantly flashed Roxanne a smile. "It's good that the two of you are going together. You can keep each other company." Roxanne didn't think much of it, merely presuming that he was disappointed because he couldn't attend the Damaris family's medical consultation. She patted his arm in consolation. "Don't overthink things. You're very outstanding as well. It's just that there are limited spots available on the Damaris family's end. Otherwise, we could go together." Colby flashed her a forced smile. "It's okay. We're both working at the research institute, so it makes no difference which of us attends." After saying that, He hurriedly took his leave from her without waiting for her response and went back to the office himself. Roxanne was utterly bewildered at the sight of his quickly retreating figure. Nonetheless, she didn't pay it much mind but went back to her office with her handbag. When they met at the research facility in the afternoon, Colby was clearly much less talkative than usual. He was also somewhat distracted when he conducted experiments. Roxanne didn't pressure him into staying focused but silently took over his duties. By the time they got off work in the evening, Colby finally gathered his wits about him. Remembering his performance earlier in the afternoon, he apologized to Roxanne. "I'm sorry I was a bit out of it in the afternoon. Give me a night, and I'll compose myself." Roxanne flashed him an understanding smile. "It's okay. Everyone has a time when they're preoccupied with something else. If you need it, you can also talk to me. I'm free anytime." Colby was stunned for a few seconds before he pursed his lips, his thoughts indiscernible. "Got it. I'll seek you out if I need it." As they spoke, they left the research institute together. Roxanne glanced at the time. The kindergarten probably hasn't let out yet. If I rush over to pick Archie and Benny up, I can make it in time. Besides, I really want to see Essie. I wonder if her condition has improved these days. However, on second thought, she remembered that the medical consultation would be held in 2 days. Therefore, she truly didn't dare take the risk. After turning it over in her mind, she decided to give Lissa a call. Lissa was just about to leave to pick Archie and Benny up when she suddenly received the call. Puzzlement inundated her. "What's the matter, Ms. Jarvis? Are you going to pick Archie and Benny up?" She couldn't think of any other reason Roxanne would call at such a time. Roxanne was taken aback for a moment. "No, I just wanted to remind you to pick them up." "Shortling," Lissa chided, "I've been picking them up for a few days now. How could I possibly forget such an important thing?" Roxanne found herself rather ridiculous. "I don't know what I was thinking when I phoned Lisa." After hanging up the phone, Roxanne hesitated before driving toward the kindergarten. The kindergarten ended at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the teachers led the children out of their respective classrooms uniformly, waiting for their parents to pick them up. Archie and Benny accompanied Estella at the back of the line. As the boys watched her look at the crowd expectantly, they looked at each other with concerned faces. "Look at me, Essie. I can turn into a bird." Benny tried to attract Estella's attention. He shaped his fingers into the shape of a bird and showed it to Estella. Alas, Estella merely glanced at his hands absent-mindedly before turning her gaze toward the crowd again. She seemed to be looking for someone. It could be her imagination, but she could feel Roxanne watching her. However, couldn't find her. When Archie and Benny noticed that Estella didn't bother to look at them, they weren't discouraged. Instead, they still tried their best to cheer Estella up. Even when Lucian arrived to pick Estella up, the girl was still looking for Roxanne. The crowd. Looking at Estella's actions, Lucian couldn't help but frown. He knew who Estella was looking for, but that was the first time he saw her this persistent. "Ms. Jarvis," Estella grabbed onto Lucian's hand and followed him to the car while her eyes were still scanning the crowd for Roxanne. When he heard Estella's voice, Lucian stopped walking and bent over to look at the little girl's face. "Essie, Ms. Jarvis isn't here. Estella pouted and shook her head while wearing a serious expression. She's here. She could clearly feel Roxanne watching her. Lucian frowned and looked around the crowd with suspicion. However, there was no sign of Roxanne. I looked. Ms. Jarvis didn't come. Let's go home, Lucian explained to Estella patiently. However, Estella stubbornly refused to get in the car. Lucian had no idea what to do, so he could only hold her hand and wait next to her by the car. At the same time, Roxanne was standing in the corner. Her heart was thumping wildly. In the past few days, Archie and Benny wouldn't stop talking about Estella, and she couldn't help but worry. Hence, she decided to come over and take a look at Estella from a secluded corner. Unexpectedly, Estella seemed to have noticed her. After searching through the crowd for some time, their eyes nearly met a few times. Fortunately, Roxanne reacted quickly enough to prevent the girl from spotting her. Moreover, she almost got discovered by Lucian. Luckily, Lisa arrived in time to pick Archie and Benny up. Ms. Lane is here. When Lucian saw Lisa, his expression turned grim, and he looked down toward Estella next to him. Estella pursed her lips unhappily. She glanced around the crowd for the last time before slowly getting into the car. When Lucian's car slowly drove away, Roxanne breathed a sigh of relief and returned to her own car. Lisa brought Archie and Benny to the side of the road to wave down a taxi, but Roxanne's car stopped before them as soon as they arrived at the curb. Mommy! Archie and Benny jumped in excitement. Roxanne smiled at them and got out of the car, wanting to help them into the car. However, the boys stopped smiling and looked in the direction where Lucian's car went. Mommy is finally here to pick us up, but Essie didn't get to see her. Looking at their behavior, Roxanne could roughly guess their thoughts. She saw how hard the boys tried to cheer Estella up and immediately felt mixed feelings in her heart. Fortunately, Archie and Benny's sadness didn't last long. They knew that Roxanne would be unhappy if they were upset. After a few seconds of feeling disappointed for Estella, the boys began smiling again and opened their arms to Roxanne. Roxanne put away her thoughts and beamed. She carried the boys into the car one after another, and Lisa sat with them in the back seat. Mommy, why didn't you tell us you were coming to pick us up? Benny asked gingerly. While starting the car, Roxanne thought of her suspicious actions before and couldn't help but feel a little guilty when she heard Benny's words. Well, it was a spontaneous decision. Benny tilted his head in confusion. Aren't you busy with work today? I finished my work early today, so I suddenly decided to come and pick you guys up. Roxanne tried her best to sound normal so that the boys wouldn't suspect her. As she spoke, Archie responded in a childish tone, Mommy's a liar. Roxanne was stunned when she heard that. Benny also looked at Archie in confusion, wondering why he said that. You've been here for a long time, right? Archie looked at Roxanne's face reflected in the rearview mirror sternly. Roxanne didn't expect Archie to notice her and wanted to brush off the matter. I saw you guys as soon as I arrived. However, Archie ignored her explanation and said, if you wanted to pick us up, you should have informed Ms. Lane not to come. But Ms. Lane came, and you were late. You even said that you got off work early today. You must be hiding something from us. Additionally, when Lucian came to fetch Estella just now, Archie heard her calling out to Roxanne. At that time, he thought Estella only called out to Roxanne because she missed Roxanne too much. Now that he thought about it, Roxanne must have been secretly keeping an eye on them from a hidden corner. Roxanne didn't expect Archie to make such a sharp deduction and felt slightly embarrassed. "I'm not hiding anything. I really just arrived." Benny finally realized what happened and exclaimed innocently, "So Estella kept looking for Mommy because she knew Mommy was here." Archie nodded. He had the same thought as his brother, but he didn't know why Roxanne refused to admit it. Roxanne felt quite helpless when the two boys acquiesced to the fact that she had arrived a long time ago without bothering to verify with her. Lisa knew what was going on. Without hesitating, she asked Roxanne with a smile, "No wonder you called me in the afternoon. You must have gotten off work by that time." Her words seemed to imply that Roxanne came early but never showed up. Roxanne smiled wryly and nodded in acknowledgement. Archie and Benny looked at Roxanne accusingly from the back seat. "Mommy, since you were here, why didn't you come and see Essie?" Benny couldn't help but ask. Roxanne was at a loss for words. She couldn't tell the boys about the grudges she had with Sonia. However, at the same time, she didn't have a good excuse to explain herself. Just when she was racking her head to come up with an excuse, Benny said, "Mommy, you didn't want to see Mr. Farwell, right? Otherwise, why would she wait for Mr. Farwell and Essie to leave before showing up?" Roxanne breathed a sigh of relief and glanced at Archie and Benny silently as a sign of acquiescence. After all, Lucian was also part of the reason why she didn't show up before Estella. The boys thought they guessed it right and stopped being angry. Instead, they comforted Roxanne, "Mommy, if you don't want to see Mr. Farwell, then don't. We will take good care of Essie." Lucian was cruel enough to leave the boys and Roxanne behind. They didn't want to see him either. Proud of her two sons, Roxanne smiled gently and said, "I know you will." "I saw." When the boys heard her, they took the credit proudly. The atmosphere in the car became lively. Roxanne's mood also became relaxed. She would respond to the boys patiently no matter what they said to her. After they got home, Roxanne even cooked with Lisa, which was considered a rare occasion, and prepared a sumptuous dinner for the children. After dinner, Roxanne played with them for a while. Then, she returned to her room when the boys were fast asleep. Her emotions ran wild when she thought of the look on Estella's face when she saw her in the afternoon. "When Estella came to see me before, she was full of joy. However, when I wasn't around, Estella seemed visibly depressed." Oh wonder Archie and Benny were so moody in the past few days when they came home. She wanted to go over and give Estella a hug, but she didn't want to lose her chance for the medical consultation. After all, she wouldn't know if Sonia was secretly keeping an eye on her. When she was deep in her thoughts, she received a text from Jonathan that read, "My grandpa has written the letter of recommendation. I'll send it over to you whenever you have the time." After reading the text, Roxanne returned to her senses and replied, "I'll go and get it. Is tomorrow afternoon a good time?" Jonathan raised his eyebrows and responded with a yes. Then, he immediately switched to his chat history with Lucian. The last message was 2 days ago when he told Lucian that Roxanne had agreed to go for the medical consultation. Jonathan casually tapped the screen and sent a message. Lucian, how long has it been since you last visited my grandpa? At the Farwell residence, Lucian watched as Estella fell asleep. As he walked out of her bedroom, he received Jonathan's text and couldn't help but frown. Wondering if Alfred had been complaining about him not showing up. He replied, "How is his health recently? I was busy for the past 2 days. Lucian went to Summer Bank 2 days ago and as a result, there were a lot of matters piled up at the company, waiting for him to deal with them. In addition to the new projects, he was completely swamped with work for the past 2 days. He even had to squeeze out some of his already limited time to pick Estella up from kindergarten. After she fell asleep, he still had to work in the study for a while." Jonathan replied shortly after, "He's in good health. However, Dr. Jarvis is coming over to collect his recommendation letter. Are you sure you don't want to visit him tomorrow?" The look in Lucian's eyes darkened when he read Jonathan's text. After all, he hadn't seen Roxanne for a while. Their lives had nothing to do with each other at all. Not to mention that she had been deliberately avoiding him. She even refused to meet Estella. When he recalled the way Estella was thinking of Roxanne in the afternoon, he felt conflicted for a moment. On the other side, Jonathan waited for a long time and didn't receive a reply from Lucian. Hence, he sent another text. "Grandpa had been talking about you for the past 2 days." After sending the message, Jonathan pondered to himself. "I've paved the way for him, and it's up to him to walk the path." After a long while, Lucian finally replied, "I'll visit him tomorrow. Please let him know." There wasn't much work to do at the Research Institute on the following day. After having lunch, Roxanne took care of some work matters and brought some supplements produced by the Research Institute over to the Queen residence. Jonathan was already waiting for her in the living room. When Roxanne noticed that he was alone in the room, she asked in confusion, "Where's old Mr. Queen?" Pointing toward the upper floor, Jonathan replied, "He's currently having his afternoon nap. We didn't expect you to come this early." Upon hearing that, Roxanne nodded and subconsciously reduced her volume as she said, "There isn't much to do in the Research Institute today, and since old Mr. Queen had helped me a lot recently, I wanted to check on his condition." Jonathan nodded. "Let's just wait downstairs until he wakes up, then." Without thinking much, Roxanne placed the supplements on the table and sat on the single couch next to Jonathan. She then started chatting with him about Alfred's condition. After talking for a while, the butler's voice sounded from outside the door. "Old Mr. Queen is currently resting upstairs. Please wait for a moment, Mr. Farwell." When Roxanne heard that, she immediately stopped talking and instinctively looked toward the entrance of the mansion. Lucian, in an expensive suit, walked into the mansion. Probably because he was listening to the butler, Lucian's head was slightly tilted downward. Jonathan acknowledged his request and sighed helplessly. He even had to rack his brains to find a way for his friend to court a lady. If it weren't for Estella's sake, he wouldn't have put in the effort. Once the butler finished speaking, Lucian nodded in acknowledgement. "All right." Upon speaking, he looked back up and glanced into the living room. And he noticed who was sitting in the living room. He furrowed his eyebrows slightly, seemingly slightly surprised. Roxanne, too, frowned. She did not know how to react to his sudden appearance. Jonathan was stuck in the middle of them as he looked between the frowning duo. Although he felt exasperated at the sight, a surprised expression crept up his face. "Lucian? It's been ages since you last visited. Why did you come here today?" Lucian gradually pulled his gaze away from Roxanne and looked at Jonathan. "I've been busy at work recently, but there wasn't much to do today, so I decided to come over and pay old Mr. Queen a visit." "How is he?" Jonathan's eyebrows twitched as he nonchalantly tossed the conversation over to Roxanne. "You should ask Dr. Jarvis about that. She's the one who's been taking care of him. She recently came over to check on him as well." Roxanne felt weirded out by the turn of events. He wasn't entirely sure if she was overanalyzing the situation, but she felt that today's encounter with Lucian seemed too much of a coincidence. Moreover, she felt that Jonathan had been intentional with his choice of words. On the other hand, Lucian's gaze had settled on Roxanne once again. Even so, he did not say anything. It was as if both of them were strangers who had nothing to do with each other. Roxanne had no choice but to suppress the weird feeling in her heart. She tried as much as possible to meet his gaze calmly and smiled. "Hello, Mr. Farwell." Lucian's lips twitched mockingly. "Dr. Jarvis, please explain old Mr. Queen's condition to me." Roxanne was once again taken aback. Ever since her return to the country, Lucian's attitude toward her had been vastly different from how he treated her 6 years ago. Most times, he was either ambiguous with her or furious with her. It was rare for her to see him act so coldly toward her. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the living room turned tense. Noticing that both Roxanne and Lucian didn't seem like they were willing to start a conversation, Jonathan's head started hurting. He had gone through so much just to create an opportunity for them to meet, but it seemed like it was not helpful at all. Jonathan had no idea why Lucian agreed to this in the first place. Even with a headache, Jonathan still had to do something to liven up the atmosphere. "The medical consultation with the Damaris family is this weekend. How are your preparations, Dr. Jarvis?" This was Jonathan's attempt in starting a conversation. Roxanne pursed her lips and smiled. "I've already prepared whatever I could think of. If there aren't any unexpected incidents, it should go along smoothly even if I don't perform extraordinarily." Jonathan glanced at the man sitting next to him, hoping that he would at least contribute to the conversation. Alas, his hopes were crushed as Lucian acted as though he did not hear Roxanne at all. For a split second, she actually felt uncomfortable with it. Once she realized her own thoughts, she clenched her fists and forced herself to calm down. She then explained Alfred's condition to Lucian professionally. Alfred had almost fully recovered. It was just that he was bedridden for many years, and his bodily functions had more or less regressed. Thus, he would need to exercise a lot before his body could finally return to its original condition. After listening to her explanation, Lucian nodded his head emotionlessly and sat down next to Jonathan without uttering a single word. The latter only sat on the couch while wearing an expressionless complexion. Jonathan sighed inwardly upon seeing this. He really couldn't understand why Lucian came over in the first place. After looking away from Lucian, he turned to Roxanne instead and said seriously, "You don't have to worry too much. The Damaris family isn't too particular about these As long as your medical skills are good, they will definitely notice you. Roxanne smiled humbly. There are a lot of brilliant doctors attending the medical consultation. I believe that their medical skills are just as impressive. Although Roxanne was very confident in her skills, Chania was the birthplace of traditional medicine after all. Since she had been practicing her skills overseas, she would not be aware if there were any dark horses from Chania. Jonathan frowned and mulled over her words before replying in a low voice, "You're right. However, I'm positive that no one is better than you in traditional medicine. Moreover, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Morrison will be attending as well. Aren't you friends with him? If he is there by your side, the Damaris family will definitely notice you. After all, the Morrison family was pretty well known in Summer Bank. On top of that, Larry was also internationally famous. The Damaris family had definitely heard of him. However, since Larry had been staying overseas for the past few years, the Damaris family didn't have the chance to get in contact with him. Therefore, the Damaris family might also pay attention to Larry's performance during the medical consultation. Roxanne nodded instantly. Larry told me that he will be attending it. We've already agreed on attending the event together. Lucian, who was quietly sitting by the side, became upset when he heard Larry's name being mentioned during the conversation. He turned to look at Roxanne with a grim expression on his face. Again with this Morrison guy. Their schedules seem to coincide too much. What is going on between the both of them? Jonathan, however, did not think much of it. He merely thought that Roxanne could easily get the Damaris family's attention with Larry around. That's great, he said with a smile. Just as the words left his mouth, he could suddenly feel the temperature beside him drop significantly. He fell silent and subconsciously turned to look at Lucian. All he saw was his friend's gloomy expression as the temperature around them seemed to plummet. Jonathan had no idea what irritated him. After thinking about it, Jonathan realized that it may be because of Larry. That was the only possible reason. Is he jealous? Jonathan was incredibly shocked. In his life, he had experienced many things. However, it was his first time seeing Lucian getting jealous over a lady. Roxanne also noticed the sudden change in Lucian's expression. She frowned in confusion as she was perplexed by the reason behind his anger. Because of Lucian's silent fury, the atmosphere in the living room seemed to tense up. Roxanne clenched her fists tightly, trying her best to ignore Lucian's gaze. She then smiled at Jonathan nonchalantly. Seeing how Roxanne was still able to smile, Lucian's already grim face turned even colder. He could no longer hold back his anger as he asked, "You seem to have a good relationship with Mr. Morrison, Dr. Jarvis." Both Jonathan and Roxanne were shocked at his sudden query. Jonathan was sharp enough to notice the friction in the air and quietly kept his mouth shut in order to make his presence as little as possible. After moments of stunned silence, Roxanne calmly met Lucian's gaze. "I've known Larry for a long time. He has taken great care of me. And I'm very thankful for that." Upon hearing her reply, Lucian pursed his lips. "Is that so? Is it even longer than the years that we've known each other?" S tone was laced with mockery. Roxanne's heart clenched at that. She subconsciously cast a look in Jonathan's direction. Lucian's choice of words was more than enough to insinuate that there was something going on between them. Fortunately for her, Jonathan's expression did not change at all. It seemed like he did not hear Lucian. Roxanne sighed inwardly in relief and turned back to look at Lucian. My friendship with Larry is incomparable with my relationship with you, Mr. Farwell. Realizing that Roxanne was still trying to avoid talking about what had happened between them, Lucian's voice was filled with scorn as he replied, "You're right. I've only met you a few times, Dr. Jarvis. How could I ever compare with the many years of friendship between you and Mr. Morrison? I wonder to what extent has Archie and Benny accepted him?" He was simply implying that Roxanne wanted Larry to be the father of her 2 children. Roxanne's eyebrows knitted into a tighter knot. The anger in her tone was evident as she exclaimed, "Larry and I are just friends. Please refrain from speaking such nonsense, Mr. Farwell." Lucian laughed tauntingly. He was just about to retort when Jonathan grabbed onto his arm and interrupted with a cough. "I think Grandpa is awake now. Let's go and check on him, Lucian." Before Lucian could even react, Jonathan grabbed him by the arm and signaled for him to follow him upstairs. Lucian looked at Roxanne, annoyance evident in his eyes as he shoved Jonathan's hand away wordlessly. Seeing that, Jonathan felt an impending headache as he thought that Lucian was going to continue fighting with Roxanne. Jonathan had deliberately created the opportunity for them to mend their relationship, not for them to argue with each other at his house. Fortunately, Lucian said nothing further. After pushing Jonathan's hand away, he silently stood up and headed for the stairs. Jonathan also scrambled to get up. "I apologize for his behavior, Dr. Jarvis. He doesn't mean anything, so don't dwell on it too much. We'll head upstairs to check in on Grandpa. Please wait for a moment. He'll be coming down soon." He smiled apologetically at Roxanne now that Jonathan had spoken up to ease the tension. Roxanne naturally would not say more about the situation. She suppressed the fury in her heart and nodded at him. Jonathan smiled sheepishly and followed after Lucian. "What's going on with you, Lucian? Didn't you come here today to patch things up with Dr. Jarvis?" Jonathan couldn't help but ask after climbing to the upper floor. Lucian merely remained silent while wearing a grim expression. He, too, did not know why he decided to come over. Roxanne was estranged from both him and Estella. Moreover, the little girl had been so sad the previous night because of Roxanne. Lucian had deliberately come over to talk to Roxanne on behalf of Estella, but he had lost his cool the moment Jonathan and Roxanne mentioned Larry's name. If it hadn't been for Jonathan, who interrupted them in the nick of time, Lucian wouldn't know what words would come out of his mouth. Observing the furious expression on his friend's face, Jonathan sighed helplessly. "With whatever that happened between the 2 of you 6 years ago, you have to be more patient with Dr. Jarvis if you want her to accept you." Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.